as
All right,
always.
next one is Graduation Requirements Committee report.
Can you, Marianne, you have a chart, right? And this will help summarize. I actually have copies too, I can.
Marion, it's on page 1.
Here, you can pass them down.
Here.
The pages.
You're too slow. Here.
134.
So, with the graduation committee, we had the 4 community members that represented each of our feeder districts. And what we found out with the chart here, it's kind of interesting because I think when we first came out, people thought we were talking about cutting requirements, but that was never really the sentiment. We weren't looking to cut any kind of requirements, but I think we were interested because we had reduction in force of staff, we had forced class sizes, and we needed to look to make sure that what we're still offering our students and our parents at Riverside Brookfield would prepare them. So if you look at this chart, it's kind of divided into 2 halves. And if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see that the Illinois requirements going down the second column, actually Illinois is one of the states that has the lowest requirements, and I think that it's just minimalist. I don't think Illinois is saying that you should only have 16.75 credits, but you definitely have to have this, and then most schools build on. The third column is RB's requirements, and what's kind of interesting is what RB does with that fine arts compared to the state. So if you look at the part that's in the gray, you see that the state says you should have 1 credit or 1 year, and they lump everything together. They lump fine arts, applied arts, foreign language all together.
Vocation.
Or vocational education. But then you look at RB, and we do that a little differently. We pull out 1 credit, we have a fine arts requirement, and we break that 1 credit into half. So we require a half a credit in the fine arts survey, and then 0.5 whatever other art course you want. And then we take 1 credit we require in either applied arts, which is your vocational ed, or foreign language. And then we have 2.5 credits in any of these electives, art, foreign language, vocational education. So this is kind of an older model. What we've learned, schools are moving away from kind of dictating how these courses are taken. The third column, so at the meetings we had, what was enlightening and illuminated several things for all of us. We had Doug Schultz from the math department speak to many different, he said on October 31st, they're going to get some insight whether or not this state is going to go to a 4th math class, 4th year of math requirement. And if they do that, that means the math department is going to have to think of new classes, or they're going to have different offerings for different kinds of students. We heard from the English department, and John will speak to that. You think, well, the English department, that's pretty consistent, but then we found out that really there's needs there that, John will talk about. We heard from Ms. Farley, and she brought up vocation ed, and I never realized it's not home ec and shop and just auto, but you see there's 48 classes, and what Ms. Farley brought out is that in that vocational ed, we really, there's the career searching, there's courses that count for dual credit, college credit, there's CAT courses, there's a lot more than that we've had. So if your students still don't know what they want to do in college, there's courses they could take there. So there's 48 courses that fall under that umbrella. We look under the fine arts, and we have 48 fine arts courses. When the fine arts survey first was implemented, probably almost 2 decades ago, they didn't have such a robust art department. And now we have 48 different fine arts courses between dance and music and choir and painting and pottery and photography, all these wonderful things that students can take. So now if we move over to the line, we thought, well, what if students can kind of fall into 3 tracks? A student who wants to go to science or college, they're college bound, or they're looking for a career in the sciences, engineering. This is what they may do. they may take 4 credits of math, English, and science, even though RB only requires 3 credits in math and 3 credits in science. They'll probably do the 4. Many that are looking at competitive colleges will consider 4 years of language, which, that more than already for the state requirement of the 1 year. And then it kind of assumes the credit, the 1 year for RB. So if you look down that first column, once the student who's thinking, no, I want to go into engineering or some kind of science pathway, they're taking 23.5 credit hours without any electives. Just the minimum that they think they need to get into college. They're already 1.5 credits over what RB requires, and they still haven't chosen any electives. If we look at a pathway that may be somebody going into vocational ed, and the yellow is just what they have to take, and if we assume they would take 4, every year something in the applied arts, and that's broadcasting, as many things there, they're at 21.5, a half credit shy of what RB requires, and they've not taken any electives yet. So, and then we look at the arts. Somebody who's passionate about the art, they want to go into fine arts or dance or theater, and so you might assume they would take the 4 credits in one of those veins, and they're at 21.5 credits without even choosing their electives yet. So what we see is that our students, just by taking minimum requirements for some of these tracks, they're already at what we require. They have little opportunity, or how do we make sure that they're prepared? How do we make sure they have the flexibility they need, and so that they can design this kind of track they want? So kind of moving forward, Jim Landell said, the fine arts survey class is a wonderful class, and I agree, for a student who's not taking any art, that's a fabulous class because they can get experience and exposure to all 4 areas in 1/2 semester. But then Jim said, but what if somebody's already in an art track, or what if they're in that college and science, that science track, and they've got, all these other things? He said there really should be a waiver, like everything else. They need to be able to waive out of that because they've met state requirements, they've met RB requirements, but now, we shouldn't force this one pathway to take 26 hours or something like that. So just being able to think about what kind of opportunities can we offer our families, offer our students to choose the path that they want to do. So the recommendation is we think that the committee should continue in some way. It's good to get, some of the community members in, because, what we found out is we had a lot of questions. We see that the curriculum is evolving tremendously, just looking at vocational education and what that has to offer. And even in our social studies, there's 18 different classes. So, did you have a question, Dan?
Well, eventually.
Yeah. Okay.
But carry on.
Okay. So, what we saw, and another recommendation I would have is that each of these departments, we get them on the calendar once a year. There might be 6 at every other month to give a presentation because they're evolving so rapidly, and there's state requirements or new things that are coming or new ways to prepare students for the new job market or the new world. I think we should be abreast of those things and really see what's happening inside. So it was quite fascinating. That's why I have. Jen, you want to add? And then
Well, yeah, about the fine arts survey. Both of my children took it as students here, and one of them was very pleased with it. One of them didn't think much of it. But when you were in discussion about the requirements of the fine arts survey, was there discussion about options to take something more definitive like ceramics or sculpture as a substitute for fine arts survey?
Well, like Jim Landell said, he had many conversations with family. He's one of our committee members.
Yeah.
And he said, if you look at that path, some of the arts, if somebody's had 4 years of art, because they were a theater major or something, or they had 2 years of art, a waiver, we have waivers for other things, it would be reasonable because the Fine Arts is a wonderful class. It's something unique to RB, but it may not fit for all 1,500 students. So we should consider, the board should consider making that possible for students who, or somebody who's, the dead-on science major, and, they want to take the photography class because.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. So,
That would substitute.
Can we have, we have these opportunities in other areas. And I think, they were talking about if a student comes up and has a compelling reason or a good reason, I think administration can go back and really present something that is, in line with our other waivers.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Laura for, her work
Yeah.
on this. She really showed the leadership on it. And of course, our community volunteers, Jim Londahl, Gene Wadalick, and Joseph Warner, and all the teachers and everyone that showed up. I think we had a very good exchange. And one thing I'd like to add to this chart is the 22 is sort of like the minimum requirement, but most of our students, I'm not sure if it's a mean or median, is between 25 or 26 credits. So that's like 6 hours a day on average for everybody. So that doesn't leave a lot of options, as Laura said, for electives. Now there's some discussion about the math requirement that's coming up, and if possibility of using applied arts for that fourth year math. That's something in the future from Doug. One thing that I guess the teachers were working on was a computer literacy class, and I guess that's sort of been put on the side, and I think that's sort of been identified as sort of a weakness in our curriculum. And there's another area that was of interest to me, and that's there is actually a consumer economics class here that's very thorough. Just looking at the
Syllabus.
yeah, the syllabus, but there's really not. If you look at the regular economics, half a credit, and the AP classes, it really doesn't cover a lot of that basic consumer economics that I think everyone should have knowledge of. So I mean, that's sort of like another area of the curriculum that needs some work. So you've basically got three other areas here: the potential math requirement, the computer literacy course, and sort of the consumer economics that we basically need to work on. Fine arts, I agree, fine arts survey is a nice course. My kids have taken it. They've had various opinions on it too, like you said, Dan. But a lot of people in the community, I think, imply that, fine art survey makes RB. I don't think that's the case. I think the 46 fine art courses we have here is what makes this a strong school. So I'd be inclined to support some type of waiver, and I'd ask Kevin to, sort of figure that out in terms of what's appropriate for that. Just because of the opportunity cost of making everybody take this course, that time could be spent in other areas that would be more beneficial to the students.
Can I ask a question? You broke this up between science, college, vocations, and arts. Have you gotten the demographics for the past 7 years of how this splits out?
No, this was just kind of plausible, and it would be a place where, the suggestion continue forward, but we know 95% of our student body pursues science college. And when we asked Beth Augustine about math and science, I think what she said, Kim, about 78% are taking 4 years of math and 4 years of science, 4 years English. If the requirement from the state bumps up to a fourth year, that yellow bar, that'll push everybody with just requirements over the 22.
It'd be 23 then.
23. And then we asked Beth Augustine, what is it on foreign language? Because RB actually has a very rich language program. If you're interested in, you got the 4 years of French, German, and Spanish. You can go beyond Spanish and then Spanish literature. We find a lot of our students, because like UAC, some colleges will waive that language requirement in college if you take the 4 years here. So in the vocational and the arts, we know there are students who are taking language there, probably about 2 years, so that will even bump them up. So just with requirements and getting ready for college, our students don't have a lot of options for anything extra. And we offer a lot.
Can you give us a little, first of all, this is all very interesting, and thanks for sending. I know it's a lot of work. But based on what John just said and what you're saying, what's your intent to do with the committee? Is your intent to get a consensus or something, the committee? And again, John brought up some other subjects. Do you plan to talk about them? Or specifically with respect to the fine arts survey, some people obviously have an impression we're going to say we're going to get rid of it or not, but could you give us a little color on what the committee plans to do and make timing for recommendation for that?
Well, it was an ad hoc, and so, for this part of it. So one of it, I think, between some of the committee members, I think we thought fine arts survey was a very important class. It was useful, if they weren't going to take any art class, they should take that class. But for students who were taking fine arts or something equal that the administration, there should be a waiver. And so maybe the administration could come back.
What I'm asking a little bit different than that. Is that the consensus of the committee?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so the consensus of the committee is...
Two action points.
Thank you.
So one was to have, administration consider that, what would that look like?
Okay.
Keep the class, definitely keep the class, keep it as a requirement, but consider what might a waiver look like.
Okay.
That was action point one.
So I'm trying to understand, they're pretty well, going on a science college course, you're pretty well, don't have much flexibility.
No.
But they're also taking 3.5, 4 additional credit hours.
Right.
Are you anticipating with the waiver out that they would drop a half a credit hour? Or are you anticipating they're going to substitute it with something else?
Well, the charts in here show you that they take other things, either dance or theater, and so many, over 100 seniors end up with that fine art survey in their last year. And so, say, I've been a band student for 4 years. We got a lot of our science college track, add band in there, and they say, I've been a band student for 4 years. I can't fit the fine arts survey requirement. Can I have a waiver?
That would tell me that they would drop a half a credit hour.
No, they go up 4 more because it's not in there, so they would be at 27.5
I guess, Gary, the way to look
hours.
at it is if we have these other holes that we're actually thinking about increasing, it wouldn't necessarily be that way.
Well,
I'm just trying to get a sense of where you believe this is going to go. Because if you're saying a lot of them, they wait till their senior year to pick it in, you're
About 30% of them. Yes.
You're saying that in that senior year, they're going to take a economics, or they're going to take an additional course, or they're not?
They're just not going to have to take that. So maybe somebody who was a band student for 4 years, in the 4th year, they have to take band for 1 semester and drop out the last semester. Or maybe they have to take it in summer school.
Let me ask, he's asking, I believe. Let's just say for a second, your waiver, if you took 4 years of language, 4 years of dance, or 4 years of music, you can waive out a fine arts survey. So one of our juniors next year who fits that criteria, and they haven't taken fine arts survey, instead of taking fine arts survey next year, do you expect they will take a half a credit less, or will they take a different course in place of fine arts survey? Isn't that what you're
That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Do you anticipate there are going to be less credit hours when they graduate by the half, or do you think they're going to go and substitute it with a different course?
I think, so when you say less, it's hard for me to anticipate that because it would be the difference of taking 26 credit hours or 26.5. So they're either going to be 4 hours over or 4.5 hours over.
Yeah, but what do you mean?
That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
If
Right.
they're signed up for survey and we exempt them from it,
Then
are they going to have study hall or a different class that period? What did you guys expect in this? If you're
They
Pam, what do you believe they're going to do?
They wouldn't take it.
Take another class.
Take another
Thank you, Pam.
They'll take something they want, or they won't take
Okay.
it, or they won't have to take summer school. A lot of our students have had to take it
So
in
our
summer school.
curriculum expert said, we'll take another class.
I'm just trying to come and
That's a good
understand.
question.
Yeah.
So you said you had 2 action points. I
Yeah,
wrote
that's
down-
action point 1. What's 2?
The consensus was that in some way the committee should continue on
Oh,
to look at,
John's got some more ideas.
Yeah, well, like John, I think the point came up in economics that if they took the AP, did it cover all the essence or?
Doesn't cover it at all.
Doesn't cover some of the key points in economics that's a requirement, but that's a way, so there's these different kind of waivers. The computer literacy was a huge one, kind of an aha moment, when Wendy Casson said she might spend 20 minutes in class getting freshman English students up to par on computer literacy. If we're thinking about preparing our students for careers in college, that's important, computer literacy. So, and then you heard, Doug Schultz talk about, it's been on the books, some of these alternative math kind of courses, but kind of on hold given, the financial. So there's a lot of stuff happening in these different areas. But what we see when they take everything they need to take, our students are really in class 7 hours a day. And they don't have a lot of options to do other things.
Can I comment or any more questions?
Go ahead and comment.
In regards to point one, in regards to the fine arts survey and what we would anticipate kids would do, I would think we would offer the opportunity to Pam and maybe have Beth Augustine come and update us on 4-year tracks of our kids to give a better picture to the community and to the board. If such a waiver was created, does it truly provide flexibility or not? Just so that we would be able to show that. The second thing is, in regards to the department agenda, getting them on the agenda, one thing I'm working with Pam and Kristen, and I talked to the board about this a little bit earlier, if you look back at the operational calendar when you have some time, I tried to map out so that March if needed, but definitely April and May, that we start talking about these different curriculum proposals and things in front of the board so that they have summertime to prep them. We can review them one more time in September. So when we bring true new curriculum proposals or curriculum changes to the Board of Education in October, they're vetted for 6 months. We've had some time to pull some data. We have some time to, last year was my first year, so I was catching up with the system already in place. And then Pam and I, this year, we were sitting back just looking at some things and saying, we need to discuss these more at a leadership council and at a building level, teacher level, pull some student data, do some things. So in regards to keeping this committee going, I think that's a good idea, that the board should have 2 representatives interacting with the teaching staff as well as the community to hear what people are looking for from the curriculum and give teachers more of an opportunity to present to this committee, and then the committee can report back and say, you know what, this would be a good presentation for the board, or this is a good proposal on how we can fill that gap or become more competitive, some of those things. So I support keeping the committee going, but I think we got to make sure we put a structure to it on the board's operational calendar so that we're not just doing a random cycle of departments in front of the board. We're putting people in front of the board. We know we got some concerns in our English department right now to make our curriculum more competitive and more aligned with Common Core. And we should be starting to talk with them after the first of the year so that we have a good 6 or 8 months to vet it. So if we want to make a change to the English curriculum, the community is aware of it, the students are aware of it, the teachers are aware of it, they have input in development and design. And we have a thorough plan instead of, being more proactive than reactive, I guess is what I'm suggesting.
Okay. Any other,
I think we should let Pam,
Pam, do you want to say anything?
Well, I appreciate what you said. I appreciate the committee, being together, and I appreciate Kevin mentioning that we possibly have the opportunity to talk to the board about the history and philosophy behind fine arts survey and why it had been made a requirement and what. So I would appreciate that opportunity. As far as a consensus of the full committee, I don't know that the teachers or all the people on the committee, were even polled or shared their opinion on what they felt about that. But I do know that you did poll the committee member, the community members, and so I'm not exactly sure that everybody that was sitting in that room, how they felt about whether they wanted fine arts survey to be a requirement or not, or if they thought there should be a waiver. So But I hope that we could discuss that, what I believe the implications are and the value of the course before the board would make a decision. That would be my only request.
We do know that one of the departments said they thought there was a bias for arts. That was said at the meeting. And they thought that their department was unfairly represented because there was this half-credit requirement in the fine arts, but not their area. Mm-hmm. We do know that in the math department, they also thought that they didn't have opportunity to develop some of the things that they thought should be developed, and especially with the pending changes in the state requirements. And then the English department said that they too identified that deficit in the computer literacy, and it is an issue. So that was 3 major departments, and then social studies talked about their global area and the 18 course. So I think there was consensus around the table that really in all the areas there's growing pains, and all the areas would probably like a half credit or a special class that maybe they could speak to.
Well, we had a moratorium for 2 years of creating new courses. So a lot of these things have been discussed at Leadership Council. We discussed at length about computer literacy, information literacy course, but we're holding in the hard economic times and not putting together something to move forward. So, but those kinds of things have been discussed for years. So yeah, there is a definitely discussion of how we can make the curriculum relevant and change it, and take a look at how the interrelatedness of all of these credits. So definitely some school districts just combine fine arts, applied arts, like you said, and the world language together and allow choice and flexibility, knowing that kids that are going to college are going to be taking the world language. So there are different ways to combine those. Here, they've been more specified how students would use them, because there was a philosophy that drove that, and so it should be considered if we're switching it, possibly. I believe when some of this was put in place, it was coordinating with the mission statement as well, which we discussed. So those are all valuable discussions to have, as you said, to continue having those, and if you change one thing, what would the implication be? So surveying students has been discussed. There's a lot of questions that you ask, such as if students weren't required to take this, what would they take instead, and how would that play out? What would the ripple effect be? and also what a university is looking at, and that's why Beth might be valuable if you wanted to ask some questions to Beth Augustine to answer those.
Hey, Kevin, I think we have to resolve 2 things. One is making sure, because we asked the staff and the community get involved, that they're all aware of whatever kind of recommendation is, which could be some people think this, some people think this, and some people think that, whatever you have. But I tell you, on the other side, Payment, I don't mean to, I know you're a fine arts person. We have got more information on fine arts survey than about anything we've talked about in a year and a half. So, and Kevin's and we had other waivers that we talked about for one meeting. Got a handout on Friday, talked about it, decided on a waiver. I'm struggling a little with, based on all this data we have already, and I'll listen to whatever you want to say, why we are going to keep spending time, more presentations, and put it off maybe for another year on this waiver, compared to the other ones that brought up Friday, you get information, we're voting Tuesday, and we just did it. And, I'd just like you to think about that.
Sure.
We've got tons of information about it already. So I do agree, because we've got a committee, even though it's ad hoc, we've got to make sure, because there seems to be a little difference of opinion, maybe get them together again and say, we got to make some kind of recommendation or pick a timeline to do it. And maybe you won't have a consensus, just like we don't sometimes. But, I don't think we need to spend a ton more time hearing about fine arts survey personally.
Well, we did go through, I'm sorry, we did go through, and we did actually the committee members, but, and so when they, and their emails were, they said, I've talked to a lot of families, and...
That was one person.
Well, the 4 committee members, and people said, I didn't know, we need more questions, and I believe the other two members said, it seems reasonable to have some kind of waiver. In their last meeting when I queried all four. And then we got the email. And then we did have representatives from the major departments talk about they felt that was unfair representation for the arts department for their department.
Was there a little uncertainty of who's on the committee and who's got a voice?
No, there was a representative from every department except physical education.
Okay.
So,
Look, I'll
in
tell
order to get a waiver, do you guys have a picture of what
We would
the
ask the
trade-off?
administration.
Okay, so you haven't gone that far yet?
Kevin, yeah.
That hasn't even been explored out to
Well,
kick
David
around.
been some rough numbers, but Kevin needs to come up with his numbers.
Specifically, what's waiverable to waiver out of fine arts, there's nothing been talked about.
No, we're not saying do away with it. We're saying it's a
No,
good
no, to
class.
waiver
keep
out of it.
Waiver out, right.
Right.
Yeah, you guys
Right.
haven't put any picture of how to
No.
waiver out of it.
No.
Okay.
We're saying it's a good class. It should be there. But, you know, there have been some families who said, you know, can I waive out of this? So that's why we looked at it and given, you know, what students have to take.
I mean, you have to look at the, where's the mission, here it is, right. Final decision requiring this is going to be made by the Board of Education. So I think, you know, next meeting, we have Kevin's input, Pam, you know, she can give what she thinks her consensus is of the faculty, because I think that's important. And eventually, we just have to decide on this. I think Laura has made a fair representation of the community members' opinions on this. And not everyone's going to be happy, but the point is, my point is, we can't have sacred cows here anymore. We can't. We can't afford it. So there are decisions that have to be made. There's opportunity costs, there's alternatives, and we as a board will have to make that decision.
Okay, any other discussion on this?
Yeah, I just
Hold
want
on,
to.
let Mike
Okay,
know.
so
On your numbers on page 110, you're listing how many students had 22 credits and such. How does a student earn .25 credit? If every semester is a .5 credit?
9-week course.
It's a free
There are some
period
non-week courses
Consumer-
in
in
the
the
state,
second
right?
semester.
The state.
There are some classes that, for
Transferred
instance,
in.
or no, resource classes or study skills classes in special education or English language learners having a tutorial that they don't get a full half credit, but they get some credit for the course. It could be something like that.
Okay, anything else on
I
this?
think, you know,
Gotta
just
talk to you.
parting way to the board is, this committee was together, you know, we had 3 or 4 meetings. There needs to be more dialogue with this committee in regards to just the general graduation requirements. I wouldn't change any of our graduation requirements. And I think that is what Laura and John are saying. That being said, you want to make sure we're staying competitive. But I do think we need to consider that there needs to be some flexibility in there. I would not lower standards for students, because we're still going to be getting assessed on a state, national level, and we still want people to move in this area because we have one of the best schools in the state. So we got to keep that in mind. But that being said, we got to also make sure that it does provide enough flexibility for students to pursue interest. So, but I don't think we've had enough to say, let's change a requirement or drop a requirement or cut anything yet.
All right,
Yeah, I'm just going to bring up one last, this opened the door to show us, you know, we talked about to our families, the vocational courses, that was brought up to us. Some of those courses will count for dual credit for Triton as electives. That's money in our families' pockets. Doug Schultz brought up that, you know, they're thinking about a math class for like going to Triton. Not math if you're going to be an engineer, but math for something else. And that could potentially count for dual credit. We know some of our families have, you know, some of our students have been very successful with their AP. With the cost of college, and so looking into some of this is helpful to our families. It's real money for some of our families. And I think it's important for us as we pursue that to keep in mind of.
okay.